The Darkmoon Fair, a place you would often go to waste time at the beginning of every month, grind for tickets to buy your new heirlooms for your alts. But today we are not going to be searching for the games and things. Today we will be finding the secrets of the Darkmoon Fair. To learn first about the Darkmoon Fair, you should first look at its founder, Celius Darkmoon. Not much is known about this little pesky gnome, besides that he is a wandering showman who likes to celebrate, relax, and have fun. Or does he? In the comics of Warcraft Legends, Volume 4, there's a certain story called Blood Runs Thicker. And this story sheds a little bit more light onto the Darkmoon Fair. Now, unlike in World of Warcraft, the band of misfits known as the Darkmoon Fair are actually frowned upon in society. Many of the people within Stormwind and Orgrimmar often try to stay away from the Darkmoon Fair. They dislike it. They pretty much frown upon them in society, which is kind of how this story begins. Kara Hicks, the strongest woman alive, as you might see her in game, is accused of murder right at the start of this book. And she is accused of the murder of Eric Falrook. Now, Kara was a little bit of a hothead. She had anger issues inside of her. Anger issues that, when pushed, she would pretty much beat the living crap out of you and make you bleed and call for your mommy. Now, one day, these two noble sons pretty much pushed her on the edge. They forced her into her anger, pretty much. Now, before she could react, Celius, the owner of the Darkmoon Fair, stopped her and made her calm down and made her relax and tried to stay away. Now, sadly, a little bit later, one of the patrons, Eric Falrook, pretty much got killed. And since she was kind of the last person to get angry and want to pretty much beat the snot out of him, she was an easy target. So, protests arise, and she was dragged off away by the marshal. Celius, however, did not like this. He believed she was innocent. He knew her like his own daughter, pretty much. He looked everywhere, and he was trying to find a witness to say that this wasn't her, to say that this wasn't her crime, that she did not do this. Soon, a servant of the Falrook household would stand up and tell of who actually murdered Eric Falrook. It was not Kara. Kara had done nothing wrong, but it was in fact Credric, Eric Falrook's brother. Credric Falrook was the actual murderer. Now, why would Credric do this, you may ask? Well, with Kara being an easy target with working for the Darkmoon Fair, he could easily get the inheritance from his brother, pin it on her, and walk away a free man like he did nothing wrong. However, the situation wasn't exactly all happy-go-lucky yet. See, Kara's execution was going on at the same time, so Celius had to hurry and come to a conclusion of how he could stop this execution and get the witness on there on time. So he sent a few of his men to go and break her out. However, the breakout was successful and freed her. However, not getting away part kind of changed things. See, just as they were starting to get away, the town marshal showed up, just as they were about to make their escape. However, the marshal was not alone. He had the witness, and he had heard the whole story, the real story. Now pretty much blamed for the murder of his own brother, Credric grew angry. He protested. He tried to rally a mob against these misfits, these outcasts he hated so dearly. However, it failed. Now, of course, you would expect them to outcast against him, to treat him differently, but alas, he was a nobleman. And he pretty much got the brush on the shoulder. They pretty much said, We'll deal with it tomorrow. You can go home for a little bit. So as he walked home, his dad grabbed him by the collar and dragged his butt home and pretty much got him one of the biggest bags of gold a man could ever see and said pretty much GTFO, you're done. His father now believed in the witness. His family outcasted him. So Credric walked away, packed his things with more gold than he would ever need, and walked out. However, as he was walking out, he was hit in the back, and the next thing you know, he was thrown in a ditch. Now, this was no ordinary ditch. This was the ditch of his now dead brother, kicking, screaming, trying to inch away from the dead corpse of his brother. He looked at the walls. He tried to climb them with his nails. Each time he failed worse and worse. His body was weak, beaten. He could not climb up the now tall walls. He looked up at the ditch opening, looked up at the sky, and could not believe what his eyes had shown him. He saw a gnome, an ogre, and a man sitting at the opening of the ditch. A band of misfits. A band of misfits he had almost blamed a murder on. He looked up at these men, and he yelled, he screamed, and he said his final words of, "I thought you said there was no violence in your fair." Celius Darkmoon smiled and chuckled and said, "We aren't at the fair now, are we?" They then grabbed the shovels. These would be the final moments of Credric. He looked up at the sky and watched as dirt fell upon his face. He would be now buried alive with the corpse of his brother he had now murdered. Now, as you can see, the Darkmoon Fair is not all it appears to be. There is also spirits throughout this area and throughout the whole grounds that you can only see if you have your character die inside the game. Now, what is interesting about each of these ghosts, if you talk to them, they pretty much tell you of how they are dedicated to the fair or how they were almost done being with the fair. It is never clearly stated on how they actually died, but they are throughout the area, still working for the fair, even in death. Now there is other strange events also, like there are certain weird creatures that are in the forest, how it is mentioned of kidnappings and killings that often occur in the forest, how there is wrecked ships off in the sea. That just goes to show that there is more than what you see